Okay, I'm really excited about this next part of the conference. She's pulling faces at me because she knows it's true. It's a great privilege that we've been able to get Esme Ward of the museum to come and speak to us at our conference. She's got an incredibly busy diary, and it's really a pleasure to have you here, Esme. Esme Ward is I'm going to read it out. Esme Ward is the director of Manchester Museum and is the first woman to hold that post in 128-year history. Prior to this, Esme was head of learning and engagement across both the Whitworth Gallery and Manchester Museum, where she led the growth of learning and public programmes embedding award-winning health and culture, early years and age-friendly work. Esme is currently leading a £15 million capital project, Hello Future, which I've been privileged to take on a tour of at least 3 times to see how it's developing in the museum, to transform Manchester Museum into a bigger and more extraordinary place, if that's possible, to visit and renew its creative and civic mission to bring more joy, inspiration and care to its communities. Esme is co-chair of the National Culture, Health and Wellbeing Alliance, co-chair of the University Museums Group, and should we just note that you're director of the largest university museum in the country. That's bigger than Oxford or Cambridge. Big up Manchester. Environmental Sustainability Lead for Manchester Cultural Leaders Group, and sits on the National Museums Directors Executive Council. She's a Fellow of the CLOR Leadership Programme and Honorary Professor of Heritage Futures at the Institute for Cultural Practices. Esme is in every way the University of Manchester, and it's a great privilege to introduce her. Esme.
Okay, she's also thrilled and a little bit nervous because I haven't done this for a very long time, but it's really, really wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I am going to crack on. What I want to try and do today is give you a little bit of a flavour of what on earth we're up to in Manchester Museum, and a kind of a whistle-stop tour through the change that's happening, what we're learning and our direction of travel. And I'd really welcome any comments, feedback. Hopefully there'll be time for questions at the end. Hello Future. Actually, this project that I started in the museum in 2018, this project was when the one I inherited was called the Courtyard Project, a courtyard that now doesn't exist because it has a 2-storey building in it, but it was a very internal name. Nobody really knew what the courtyard was, and so we did the only thing really, which was we asked our visitors, because they have the best lines, always, what should we call it? So Hello Future is what a little 8-year-old lad said when we told him what we wanted to do, and he's like, oh, why don't you just call it Hello Future? And it's stuck. So it is a £15 million transformation. It's focused on building better understanding, compassion and empathy for each other and our world. And you'll see there's a real focus on foregrounding inclusive narratives and new perspectives. So it is about bricks and mortar, but also the why and the how is really critical. This is a great image of the museum when it was being built in the 1890s, and where you see the horse will actually be our new entrance on Oxford Road. As Chris said, it's one of the largest university museums. We're in disagreement, so we're still having a bit of an Oxford-Cambridge debate about the size of our museums, but you know what, I don't really care about that. I'm much more interested in who's most deeply loved by their communities. So it's an Alfred Waterhouse building, and we have over 4.5 million collections, objects from both natural sciences and human cultures. And it first opened in 1890 as an appeal to the civic spirit, scientific curiosity and devotion of the townsfolk of Manchester, which is pretty good, actually. So our mission, so we're built on these really strong values, and the mission at the museum hasn't changed. So we are there to build understanding between cultures and a more sustainable world in everything we do. And a lot of work we've done has been really focused on the values that are driving us. And simply, as you can see, a commitment to inclusion. We're in Manchester, for goodness sake. It's a hyper-diverse city. This is the future. Also, a commitment to imagination. Research, highest form of imagination. Who doesn't want more awe and wonder? This should be one of the most creative spaces in the city. And then finally, a commitment to care. And for us, we are absolutely an institution born of empire, and we are thinking about what an ethics of care means for a museum. So in our world, so often when you talk about care, you're talking about the way you care for collections. If we think about how we extend that care to people and ideas and beliefs and relationships, it changes what you do and the way you work. And is just one of the reasons, this notion of an ethics of care, why we believe one of the ways to care for certain collections is to explore restitution and different relationships globally. So, sustainability has always been a really core part of our work, and we are very proud to be the world's first carbon literate museum. We're developing sustainable infrastructure, things like air quality monitoring station with Manchester Urban Observatory will be on our roof, but really environmental action and social justice are driving our work, from conservation programmes locally and internationally, relationships that we have and partnerships that inspire and support climate and ecological action. And we have a dedicated post, an environmental action manager, to really power this work. And of course we've got the frogs. And we'll be opening a new display which is focused on our conservation work across South America, which has been happening for a very, very long time, and we're building. And simply, we want the museum to be a place where everyone feels they belong. This is an image from an iftar that we held in the museum in 2019. Extraordinary evening, actually probably the most amazing evening I've ever had in a museum in my life, where we opened the museum and it was open to all faiths and none. And the letters and the feedback I got from students, from all sorts of people who live in Manchester, maybe knew the museum a bit, maybe even university students, was that this was the first time they really felt the museum maybe understood and that this could be a place where they belonged. And there are a whole host of new inclusive co-designed facilities throughout the museum. A changing places toilet. Every public building should have a changing places toilet for people with profound and multiple learning disabilities and physical disabilities, and that's been co-designed with one of our volunteers, Joe, and his carers. A dedicated prayer space, a quiet room, and a really beautiful picnic area, so that you don't feel like a second-class citizen or visitor if you bring your own food. And we are part of a poverty research programme, with staff being trained as social justice researchers, working with someone brilliant in the university called Carl Emery, working across Ardwick, looking at the assumptions we make around poverty and essentially how we can be better neighbours. So when we reopen, we will be reopening early every Saturday. We'll open at 8 and we'll be running breakfast clubs, and that's just about us being a good neighbour for folk in Ardwick. This used to be the courtyard that you entered to come into the museum, and it now has this 2-storey extension and galleries. And I'll just give a bit of a flavour of what's inside these spaces. So the ground floor has for us it feels absolutely enormous, about 500 square metre exhibition hall. And really this is a space to bring people together and explore the big ideas. This is a playground, and showcase research in really engaging ways. And from my perspective, this is a great space. We can do anything. You can hang anything from that ceiling. pretty much that floor can take anything. It can be a big black box. We can do what we need to do with the space. And our opening exhibition, which is, as we speak, currently moving finally from Shanghai to Shenzhen, it's on a tour through China, is Golden Mummies, so of Egypt. So the museum, it's based on the museum's collection. We've been touring it for the last 4 years across America and China. It's a we have one of the world's best collections of Greco and Roman Egyptian material. It's a very, very gold, sex, death and decolonisation. What's not to love is how my colleague Campbell, who's curator, describes this. And it's the first time that these have been displayed. So that will be on for a good long time period. It'll be over all over the summer. Every single exhibition will be free. And that will be followed by something really different. So this is an exhibition we're working on at the moment called Wild. And this is exploring wildness, conservation and rewilding, but also the concept of wild, not least as a colonial construct. And we're working really closely with academic colleagues, with charities, and with really extraordinary rewilding projects, both locally and all over the world. And this exhibition, we want to play around a bit with the exhibition making mode. So this one will be on for a whole year and will change within the context of that year. Upstairs on our first floor, the very first gallery you will come to really kind of sets the tone for the rest of your visit. And this is a new gallery. It's called the Belonging Gallery. And this is exploring themes of belonging and inclusion through global comic art and our collections. The title for this gallery actually came from a conversation that I'd had back in 2019 I'd been in Toronto, and I'd met with a whole host of Indigenous elders, First Nations leaders in Toronto, and we'd been talking about the dehumanising language of museums, and actually the very extractive nature of both research and museums. And we've been talking about, words like collections and objects and artefacts, and how very often the people most intimately connected to your collections are the ones who are most distant from them, either emotionally or physically. And actually, it was an amazing man called Gerald who just said to me, he said, well, of course, we just call all of these museum stuff, we just call them belongings. That's what we call them. And we've been thinking a lot about this over the last few years. And in late 2019, we repatriated 43 secret, sacred and ceremonial items to Aboriginal communities in Australia. We were the first European museum to do so. And as a result of that work and those relationships, supported by the Ellerman Foundation, we recruited and appointed a curator of Indigenous perspectives who is curating this gallery and very usefully has a PhD in comic art, which is great. So this space is examining how humans, animals and plants have lived harmoniously with each other and in different landscapes. And when they no longer do, it's really going to offer insights into how we might kind of make new harmonies in the future. And we really hope it sets a tone for the next gallery you come to, which is the Li Kai Hung Chinese Culture Gallery. This will be a multilingual gallery exploring the rich cultural heritage of China and its historic and contemporary links with Manchester. And this is all about building empathy and understanding between Manchester, the UK and China, particularly against a backdrop in the last few years of pretty foul harassment and discrimination of Chinese communities. I'm really excited about this gallery. One of the things I think is great is it draws on rarely or never seen collections from cultural partners across the city, including the wonderful John Rylands. So we will be, we've literally got all these people across the city to explore what they have that speaks to relationships with China. It's also, from the outset, been a collaboration with the Manchester China Institute and will include a gathering space which is really around our work with Chinese communities and the student body in particular. And all of the new galleries, unlike actually the rest of the building, all the new galleries will bring human cultures collections and natural science collections together, so you won't have that nature over there, culture over there. Like this is a Milo Deer we've just acquired. It was near extinction, this species, and it was native to China, and in the early 20th century it was sent to the UK, a kind of safety net population. Deer like the UK, it thrived in the UK, and has fairly recently been reintroduced back to China. So it's this really interesting story of kind of cooperation. It's just one of the examples. And my colleague Brian Sitch got a Headley Fellowship just to research for a year essentially stories and examples of connectedness between Manchester and China, and many of them will be in this gallery. And then onto a newly designed space, which is the top floor of the extension, which is the South Asia Gallery. And this has gone through a real journey, this gallery. So it's a partnership with the British Museum. And I'll be honest, when I came on board, I mean, it's great. It was this, extraordinary collections, both the museum's collections and British Museum's. Brilliant idea to have a performance space at the heart of it. But it's going to be like a chronological history of South Asia, professionally curated, and then almost a sense, and then a performance space in the middle. So that's where communities can come in and do performances about it. And I'll be honest, everything about that felt wrong. We'd done so much consultation for this gallery. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen a gallery where so many people were consulted with. If I'm going to be honest, I think we've done a lot of consultation and maybe not very much listening. So we actually stopped the project and just said, let's just regroup a bit. And we invited 120 of those people we've consulted with to a meal. It's a good place to start. Great restaurant, Vermilion in East Manchester, hosted a huge lunch for us all to get together and actually ask those 120 people, what is it you really care about? Because I'm not sure they'd ever really been asked that. What could this gallery be? And out of that process really emerged the idea that what this could be is the UK's first permanent gallery dedicated to diasporan experience and contribution of South Asian communities. And so that is what it will be. And this real sense of it being a place for emotional connection. So it will explore South Asia's impact on life in the UK and present a kind of dynamic, quite contemporary take on South Asian and British Asian culture. And that performance space is staying, but we hope it will be a bit more generative than previously. And the relationship with the BM, British Museum, is still there. They are part of this. And we are drawing widely on their collections. But the how we've done it is been a real mix of absolutely the most energising thing I've ever been involved in, absolutely the most exhausting thing I've ever been involved in, and so it's done the spirit of collaboration and co-curation on a fairly epic scale. So emerging out of those kind of people we originally met with, we have 31 people, mostly, although not all, but mostly of South Asian heritage, none of them museum people, real mix, and they are called the South Asia Gallery Collective, and they've curated the gallery. They are community leaders, educators, artists, scientists, musicians, teachers, students, business people. They're people. They're an extraordinary bunch. And they have, over the last 3.5, 4 years, taken a thematic approach, and it will be bringing their lived experience and collections together. And if it works, it will be like alchemy. And we shall see. So there will be a really extraordinary new commission, and this doesn't give a flavour of it at all, but the kind of mural that you see is a new commission from the Singh twins, brilliant British Punjabi artists. They do a lot of work thinking about the impacts of empire, the complexities of empire and contemporary British experience. And so this will kind of set the tone when you come into the gallery. I'll not go on too much about that because there's an awful lot I could say. So it's not just the new spaces at the gallery. Actually, we're thinking about more holistic transformation. And actually, one of the things that we've really moved forward on is this broader sense, not just through co-curation with people, but how do we open up the museum? How is this going to become the kind of museum the city, the university, people need? How can it be really useful to people? And so this is the top floor of the museum, which is going through big change. And about 5-6 years ago, I was lucky enough to go to Bangalore in India, and I went to a space that blew my mind actually. So Bangalore is a real tech centre, and I went to a tech firm that was experimenting with the idea that it would turn one of its floors in this kind of 13-storey building, it would turn one of its floors into a space for environmental activists and charities in Bangalore. And that then these environmental activists and charities would use the knowledge capital and the energy and the insight of the tech firm and its people to support their work. And it was absolutely amazing. And I remember visiting it thinking, wonder what that would look like in a museum. How would that even work? What could that be? And so the top floor is being opened up to environmental and educational charities that share our mission and vision. And it's quite something. So there's a range of spaces up there. There's a teaching studio, there's a therapy space which we built, which is specifically for young people, a therapy room, and we're going to have a coordinator based with us who just works on young people's mental health across Greater Manchester, amazing clinical psychologist. And that's really emerged from work that we started just after I arrived with an extraordinary charity called Project Inc, or Pink College. So Manchester Museum is a museum, but we are also a registered specialist college. When lockdown hit, we realised, so what being a registered college means that we have around 15 neurodiverse young people, 16 to 25-year-olds, based in the museum. We are their school, essentially, and they're in every weekday. And when COVID hit, because we sit under museum rules, we had to close. So these vulnerable young people have lost this kind of really important space for them. So I remember very quickly after COVID hit, us scrabbling around, trying desperately, which we succeeded, to register as a specialist college. Because if we came under college rules, rather than specialist college rules, rather than museum rules, we could open. And I'm really proud that we did that. So although we're closed to the public, and we were closed a little bit for most of the lockdown, we were actually open every day for Pink College to do their work. And we are now their HQ. So Pink College now runs spaces all over the north of England. They will run them all over the UK soon enough. And I just think it's extraordinary work, and it's a brilliant way to really, for us to learn and develop our understanding of neurodiversity, and for them to draw on the museum's collections. And it's one of the reasons we have a therapy room, because we've had that conversation about what is needed, and the whole top floor is about the future of education. And heartbreakingly, a therapy room is maybe part of what that future looks like. So we have that space. We also have a greenhouse. And the other element, alongside educational charities, we also have a supplementary school called Rekindle, who are based on our top floor, who work with young people, mostly from Moss Side, about the kind of education system they would like to see in the world, rather than the realities of their school. And alongside that, we have environmental charities and activists. And we have some amazing partners already with us, and I think it will grow and grow. So we have Climate Emergency Manchester, fantastic group of activists within the city who are really holding the council and others to account around their decarbonisation and plans more widely. We have Multilingual Manchester. In fact, we're a multilingual museum. We have a digital heritage volunteering multilingual project. That's a really important part of our work. Invisible Cities, brilliant charity, people experiencing homelessness who give tours of the city. We are working with them and they're based with us. And over time, that will grow and grow. And a shared role with the Carbon Literacy Project, who are also in part based with us. So the idea with that top floor is we just bring people together to learn, share ideas, build community, and make plans. And I guess in a nutshell, it's part of a way of us thinking. We think the future's collaborative. It's the only way. From my perspective, it's also a really good business model because for some of the co-working spaces, you get paid rent. So that's great. But it is really that sense of how you open up your museum and bring as many people as you can. So these are just some of the spaces in development and changing. And when we open, which will be February 2023, not very far away. When we open, we will be 25% bigger. And we will, we can't wait to welcome everyone. I'll be honest, it's quite hard running a museum without the public, but we're really, really looking forward to bringing everyone back. And I suppose one of the things we really want to do is we want the museum to not only be deeply loved by people, but more widely loved, and to have a broader range of people. So that's what we've got in store, and we hope that Manchester is missing this place where, you know, there are very few free civic spaces where you can bring generations together to explore the complexity of what it means to be human, and we really hope the museum will be that for a very long time. Thank you. To answer questions if anyone's got any. Yeah. I think there's a roving mic.
Yeah.
She says. Just grab a walk.
Just be here.
Awesome. Thank you. That was an incredibly inspiring talk. If you were to speak to the current cultural sector or the right-wing press, both museums and universities are accused of doing an amazing sort of double sleight of hand in which they're both erasing history and talking about it too much, or talking about the wrong types of history. I was just wondering, what would your response be to a deliberately bad faith interpretation of what the museum's new mission is, or more simply if someone was to say, I just want to see cultural artefacts, I don't want to be lectured to?
Yeah. Welcome to my world. I was down at DCMS 2 weeks ago talking to them about repatriation. Well, there's a few things really. I mean, from where I say, I love museums. I've worked in museums my entire career. Museums have told the same stories, and they are pretty much, not always so much now, but to date, they have primarily been white men's stories for 100 years. Those stories still exist, they are still there. And actually what we're really interested in is making our understanding of the past and the present more complex. So that any sense, I took round a fairly right-wing journalist recently who, when we were in the Belonging Gallery, looked at me and just said, it's a woke nightmare. And actually we just had a conversation about it. So part of the divisiveness that we have, and it's why we've actually really started thinking about empathy and framing the work around empathy. Where can you have exactly that conversation? Where can we start to really, you know, think in public a bit more, open up our thinking? So I'll give a really good example. We have a tusk from Benin. We know it was absolutely, unequivocally, it was looted from the 1897 expedition. And so we put our task out on display with all the information, the facts, what we know. And we asked our visitors, this is what we know, where does it belong? And we put a comments book out, which is amazing, actually. And 87% of our visitors said, Benin, please, 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 Benin. And for under 16s, that was 100%. So there's a really interesting generational shift as well. But more than that, it's the comments book for me, and the conversations of visitor teams said it was their favourite place to be in the museum. Because they literally have, you know, so there was this one time there was a teenager essentially arguing with their grandma about this. And that's what we want in our museums. So for me, I really hope when people visit, it doesn't feel like they're being lectured to. I really hope it feels like an invitation to explore and to kind of grapple with some of these. Because the reality for us in museums is this is what we're grappling with all the time. And I'm going to give you one other brief example. So just week before last, we had a visit from the Six Eco Nations, so First Nations visit, and a whole host of elders. And they were overlooking at collections. They were in the UK. And we spent a couple of days with them. And on the second day, there was one object they were looking at, which was a small, to us looked like a small beaded purse. And one of the elders sort of said, I think, do you know what's in that purse? You do know what you've got, don't you? And we said, no. And, you know, spoiler alert, museums don't know enough about what they've got. Essentially said, I think you'll find inside that there may well be an umbilical cord, and nobody would have ever given that away. Of course they wouldn't. So on the one hand, heart-stopping, gut-wrenching moment, and then literally 5 minutes later, the same elder came to me and, you know, sort of took my hand and just said, heartfelt thanks for caring for our collections. And in a nutshell, for me, that's the complexity. That's it. And he said, on the one hand, I'm heartbroken it's here. On the other, I am actually really grateful these collections have been cared for. And for me, we've got to talk about that. I don't know whether that answered it.
Thank you very much, Esme, and thanks, Michael, for a great question. I thought it would trigger a few anecdotes, and it has done. But thank you very much.